Welcome to the Inventure Podcast, where our goal is to discuss everything commercial real estate related and maybe not. I'm joined here today with Kelvin Comstock. Kelvin is one of our associates at Inventure and soon to be investor relations expert. And my name is Doug Bozer, CEO of Inventure. We're missing somebody today. Austin's not here today.
He's not.
He's got a little personal time getting out of the office and enjoying some good quiet time, right? So in that case, we've got Kelvin here to help me run the podcast, answer some questions, and do a little deep dive into some of his life here at Inventure. So welcome, Kelvin.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So today we're sitting obviously not in our regular podcast studio at Inventure Properties, Inventure Capital home base, but we're out here at our job shack in Sartell, Minnesota at our new Windham Hotel project. Maybe tell me a little bit about what it feels like to be new to Inventure and building a hotel.
Right, so honestly, the atmosphere here at Inventure is just something that coming outside of being college life, right? You struggle, there's times when you're in college you just don't, you run into a roadblock and you don't know what the next steps are, right? So I met with Austin early on, and he kind of gave me that guidance of where I wanted to go, right? So following that, working at FedEx was, obviously the atmosphere is more corporation based. So I just coming along here, being listened to and having, your thoughts, I want to say, thought of, right? So, and everybody around here is going one direction. Everybody's aligned, and I feel like that's very important for an organization because everybody's on the same page.
So I've had well over probably 200 employees, from the construction company moving into the real estate and development. What do you think your experience, you kind of got thrown to the wolves a little bit in the fact that you're actually running a construction project as well yourself, right? A small tenant improvement. But how did that feel? Did you feel like, I literally threw you to the wolves, or is the mentorship that I'm helping you with been a good experience?
So I wouldn't say throwing to the wolves, but, I didn't know much about construction. Now I can say I know a decent amount to be somewhat dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Every time I walk into a space, I look at it completely different than I did 8 months ago. When it comes to something like a door, when I think of a door frame now, the wires that are inside of everything I look at differently. When it comes to throwing to the wolves, what I'm trying to do, being young, is make the decision myself. And if I'm not confident in it, I get your guidance. Mm-hmm. So I usually give you two options. Mm-hmm. So then I'm building my own confidence and knowing if I was right or wrong and getting your experience involved with that guidance. So I'm kind of building two people's thoughts into one and
Sure.
building it bigger.
Sure.
So.
And with that process, so you're kind of being a project manager, you're kind of being, somebody helping me with development, but really your key role right now has been working with our investors and helping them get into our portal. So as we raise a new capital fund, that you're helping them come into that, right? So what's been maybe one of the questions that investors have asked you consistently about our process with Inventure, to where you're like, oh, if I could say this on film to my investors, to the people that you serve, I serve, what would that one thing be maybe?
So the one question that I usually get is, how many times do they get distributions? And, early on when Doug were in Sioux Falls, one of our good partners that we use for taxes is, investors like winning 12 times a year rather than 4 or 2. So we distribute on a monthly basis to our investors, ACH directly through our InvestNext portal. Whatever bank account you have linked gets directly tossed into your account for you.
So help me understand. So the industry, from what you've what you're telling me is that the industry typically distributes on a semi-annual or maybe quarterly basis, and we do something different here?
Yes. So usually it depends what deal. So right, for this hotel, we're doing it differently just because it's on a different basis of revenue. But for our other projects, like let's take Egandill, we just started distributing for that. That'll be on a monthly basis. So usually investment firms will go quarterly or even cut the year in half, and then they'll distribute once or twice a year. So we're on a very good basis of getting our investors money, so they know that they're being thought of.
And to your point, they feel like they're winning because they're getting 12 checks a year, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to circle back a little bit to you, Kelvin. What attracted you to Inventure? Like, what was the things that when you stepped inside those four walls that first day and you're like, okay, I'm meeting with Austin, I'm meeting with Doug. What was the thing that you felt like this was the right place for you?
The atmosphere. You can feel it right away that everybody's goal oriented. Mm-hmm. So everybody wants to be better. Everybody wants to think of the long game, master planning. We'll get into that later. It's the bigger picture than what you're in right now. And that's extremely important for me. That's how I've always thought in my process through life. So just master planning your life and the business, and seeing you and Austin develop that is something that I'm going to cherish for forever.
So the role's pretty dynamic, and even as of last night, you got to do something new, right? And you watched me kind of perform a little bit of a dance.
Mm-hmm.
What was last night? Tell the viewers about what was last night.
So last night, Doug and I were at the Sauk Rapids Planning Commission meeting for the Fairview Gardens plat, and we're helping a client put 5 lots covered by a PUD.
So what's a PUD?
Planned unit development.
Okay.
And currently there's 2 lots. We're dividing it into 5, and we are just putting it through the entitlement phase, and then later on we're trying to develop and get those lots ready to sell for the client. So overall, we're working through what the city has proposed to us, and we're kind of seeing what's the cheapest option for us to go with overall for what's best for the city. So we're trying to figure out how we can get these lots priced at a decent price, so then a physician can come in and get the lot for a decent price, so then it can overall benefit the whole city overall.
So ultimately, you're trying to create value for our client, right? So our client, we're working in this case, we're platting on behalf of the client. So we're trying to create value for the client, but we're also trying to create value for the city. That sounds like a win-win scenario.
Yeah.
Is that it? Tell me about the philosophy. I think that we talk a lot about win-win.
Yeah. So when we talk about win-win, that's our thought process. One, we try to build every relationship on a win-win situation. Why? Because why not? Mm-hmm. If everybody wins, then why say no? Mm-hmm. So it's one of the biggest things that Doug's taught me. How do you teach somebody to not say no when the answer is yes? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how we build our relationships and how we build the trust around our relationships, because if everybody wins, then why not keep winning? So
back to the platting for a second. We had to stand in front of the city or Planning and Zoning Commission, right? Yep. And explain to them what we were planning on doing with this. And then they had a lot of questions for me. So public speaking, if you're not used to public speaking, right, this is a new experience for someone to step up in front of the mic, in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, people in the audience, and really explain why this is the right thing to do for these lots. And the city had some questions. They've got some questions about sizes. They had some questions about the utilities and things around it. And getting up and standing in front of everybody and talking was something that you've probably never experienced before. And I always tell young people that are thinking about getting into real estate, especially in this model of development, you're going to really need to get used to speaking in public and being able to defend your positions, because if you can't, most likely what you're trying to get to, you won't achieve. So really working towards that. I'm really proud of you so far, of everything you've done, right? And not so far, but you've done an amazing job in 8 months or so in trying to encapsulate all of the things, because we move extremely fast, right? The things that you had to learn and stuff like that is really, you've impressed me in how you've kept it, learned it, retained it, and then starting to do it on your own. I'm intrigued about what your past helped you to be able to do that. So you were hockey, right, in high school, and you played a lot of hockey over the years. So what things did that give you that helps you now in your role here at Inventure?
So when it comes to hockey, I just think of it as a teamwork aspect, right? So just whatever, the commitment, the drive, the hustle that we like saying here, the hockey's got all that to it. Hockey is, when I think of it, it's got every sport into one, right? You got the hand-eye coordination, the tackling, the checking, the physical.
Do we check here at Inventure? We write checks. We write a lot of checks at Inventure.
So it's just, having to do everything, right? Learning to do everything quickly. I've always tried to be as quick of a learner as I can be for myself and for whoever I'm working with. So I've always just tried to really create as much value as I can wherever I am and doing what I say I have to do.
So using a hockey analogy, you skate to the puck, right? It's one of the big things they teach you, right? So how could you apply that same thought process to what we do here?
So basically, when, I like using Gretzky's saying, where it's going, get there before where the puck's going. So anticipating the next step. Real estate's a big game of Monopoly, what's your next move? What's your opposing player's next play? So anticipating, whether it's anticipating what's going to happen in the construction project, or anticipating the development, or anticipating where somewhere's going to go. Like, this hotel was strategically placed because we know what's going around. And
we're anticipating what the growth will happen in Sartell.
So anticipation, going to where the puck's going, not where it's at. So that's a big piece.
That's a great one. I like that. So what do you think the biggest mistake you see new developers or developers making, now that you know enough about this process? What do you think is one thing that you've learned over your time here that other developers might make?
So I would say, what we've recently learned with this hotel is what Doug hasn't seen before, so I'll use that. Infiltration ponds, and, kind of what we had our engineers look at, and kind of how we thought our thought processes were, and we kind of created a prelim budget off of an infiltration bond, and we needed a filtration bond. So the difference I was unaware of, right? I didn't know there was a difference. I didn't know coming in. I didn't know what was actually on the bottom of those ponds. So learning that, and learning the piece of kind of putting the developer hat on, I would say just make sure, all your Qs are in, make sure your civil engineer's got everything laid out for you, have him double check it, then have whoever's doing your excavating look at it and kind of make sure everybody's at peace with what that plan is for the ponds.
Yeah, and I think the word that comes to mind for me is dynamic, right? These processes now, especially with MPCA, with water control, things like that, rate control, are ever changing, just like with the Pollution Control Agency, right? When lead was in the ground and asbestos was in the ground or in the buildings, in the early 80s, that didn't exist, right? So as the world started to learn about these things, it dynamically started to change. So every day you woke up, something new was happening on your job sites. And so I think about this water control, right? It's stable for today, but tomorrow a city might adopt a new ordinance or change something and be like, nope, we're going to pivot to this now. So, asking the questions of, is this up to date? Is this the latest ordinance that we're following underneath? I think is a really good catch with that. We talk a lot about other people's money, and when we talk about that, and we're spending, in this case, I look out at the window here this morning, and it's a $12 million hotel development, almost 13. We're spending other people's money, right? And so it's an honor to do that. It's also something that we think about a lot, going, we have to account for every one of those dollars. And I know you're really proud of the milestones project that you're running currently, and the budget that you're running with that. Talk maybe a little bit about how granular you're getting with your budgets and how the team here on the hotel are running their budgets to be able to ensure that at the end of the day, the accounting for all of these millions of dollars is back to the penny, right? Because we have to account for it to be able to tell the investors we have hit the budget, we're under budget. So maybe talk a little bit about how you're managing that budget specifically.
Yeah, so what I've learned is, the budget process with all in these 8 months. And, it started over at the Owner's Rep project at Centricare, kind of learning the background, the overview, I want to say. Mm-hmm. And then kind of with this project for milestones is kind of the in-depth, getting into the guts, learning on the fly. And I'd say the biggest thing is anticipating the budget changes. So the one thing that I've learned is, make sure all your cues are in when you walk the site with the tenant and the subcontractor, the smallest thing to an outlet, what that costs, and then anticipating, is that in the budget? Is that in their scope of work? So budget-wise, I'd say anticipating the change order if there is one, right? So what I'm anticipating is, some smaller blinds, right? We're going to need different blinds. So, we don't have that in the budget. So obviously anticipating that at the end of the project, getting those blinds in for our tenant. So everybody's.
And so let's say you didn't have it in the budget, right? Where do you get that money from if there's no line items for that budget? There's what, do you grab it out of your pocket? Where does it come from?
So we have contingency. That we do use. You can pull that from, if you're extremely under budget, you're under budget in a different cost code. I do pull that money from that side if needed. So if, obviously saving money is the biggest factor. Mm-hmm. Getting things done for, we always have our owner's cap on for any project that we do. So. Yep. We're not just saving money for us, we're saving money for the investors and the partnership. So that's how I always think of it. And I also think of every, as a project manager, I think of it as being owner's rep for you and the partnership as well. So I got the project management, the ownership, and the owner's rep piece.
And we'll do another podcast here soon about owner's rep, because I think that's just a huge element of what we do, that we help to protect our clients in a lot of cases. But back to contingency, so I've got a good friend, Eric, he and I talk a lot about construction and contingencies, and he works in a little bit different world than we do, but to make projects work, sometimes we skinny down that contingency, so it makes it even tougher for us to really manage a project extremely tight, where he might have $1 million of contingency, so if the owners change something, you just pull it from that. But in all of our cases so far, we've come with a little bit of leftover contingency at the end of the project. I think you're running a couple $1,000s left on your milestones project, which is exactly right. Those dollars don't become our dollars, they become the dollars of the project, which ultimately flow back to the bank account of the investment, which is ultimately investor dollars, or get distributed out to those investors so that money ends back up in their pocket as a return of equity. So maybe a question for me. What question would you have for me on the podcast this morning as we sit here, and the sun's just starting to come up. I can see the framework, and hopefully Isaac can throw a couple pictures out to our listeners this morning on social media to show where we're at. But we're looking at a first floor. Jason Slinden, our project manager, just walked in here a little bit ago, or our site soup. So as being a good student, right, and being a great mentor, I'm trying to do the things that I committed to you. So what would be some things that you'd have questions of me about?
For the questions wise, a lot of my questions get asked through the storytelling, your experiences of what you've been through. And, I take all of them in, and when I close my eyes, that's the stuff that I think about when I'm trying to fall asleep. Like, wow, I can't, the thought process of, how you've gotten to where you are today and the stories behind that, and some of them get deep, some of them are happy, some of them are sad, right? You experience all the emotion, but learning from each one of those emotions is huge for me. So I'll lead into the question here, and what gives you your hustle?
That's a great question. My hustle comes a lot from my, being raised on a farm, right? You had to, every day you had to move. My dad was also in the military, so there was even less time because in the military you hustle all the time. So if you put those two things together, I always tell people that really created my work ethic, right? I just never sat still. And I have a yearning to do more. And it's not about money. We talk a lot about that, right? Money and wealth creation comes from the things we do. It's a byproduct. But if you do what you say you're gonna do, right? And you apply hustle and you apply that pressure, you will be successful. Augments to that are, you've got to create your own personal brand. We've talked a lot about that this week, right? I worked hard when I was extremely young to build my brand locally through, being involved, being engaged with civic activities, being involved with philanthropic activities, putting myself out there so that people saw me, not to be braggadocious, but they saw me in the moment at the table. And so then the next time they met with me, they're like, oh, I remember seeing you here, I remember seeing you here. So I think that hustle just came from, and I don't like to fail, right? Failure for me is just, the old saying, it's not an option. I just want to continue to succeed and grow. This weekend, my wife bought me a little present to go down and learn about restoring furniture, right? It was amazing. I learned so much, and then I sat back that evening and went, I was able to learn again, right? And as we continue to grow through our careers, learning is the best thing you can do because it creates I'll call it the full circle, the person that can do almost anything. So. But yeah, hustle is, if you don't want to hustle in this industry, you might as well step aside because somebody will come plow past you. That's a good question.
Yeah. Also, kind of leading into what I want to say is what makes you wake up at 6 a.m. and want to put on your developer hat?
So being in construction for 30 years plus now this year, I've felt I'll call it the proverbial pyramid, right? So as a subcontractor, as a vendor, you're on the bottom of that pyramid. And continuing to want to grow, as you become a general contractor, you move up the pyramid. And as a developer, you sit on the very tip of the spear, as we call it, right? So we control the money, we control the contractor, we control the land, we control the real estate development itself, the process, the entitlements. And so, yeah, maybe you could say I have a control issue, right? but to me, that's the most rewarding piece of this business and my career today is going from construction to then pivoting into commercial real estate and development, is that we control it in the right way. We control it in a very methodical and systematic process, so it's not chaos. As Brandon Dawson says, chaos leads to failure. And if we don't want to fail, then we have to remove the chaos. And so Jason doesn't show up on this job site this morning expecting a lot of chaos. He set the process last night to say who's showing up today, what's going to happen. And so those things just kind of, again, they happen as a process. And so, I think that it's constantly striving to do better.
What about the things that you can't control? So let's say projects falling off a schedule. What's the things that you tap on when something's not on schedule?
So first things first, you have to be honest with whoever you're dealing with, right? So if it's a schedule issue, be honest to the ownership. If it's a cost issue, be honest with the people that are financing it. All too often, people wait to the end to bring up the issue, right? So the best way to work through an issue is to get as many people working on the issue so that they can help you figure out the issue. So if I waited till the last day and say, oh geez, we're over budget all of a sudden, Mr. Financial Institution, do you think they'd be happy with us? But if I'm doing it 2 months prior, well, there's workarounds. We can think about stuff. How can we maybe pivot some budget dollars to make some changes? So I think just being honest, communication in this industry, I've got a saying, it's 99.95% of all the problems we have is a communication issue. It's not an issue of, do we know what we're doing? Do the plans say what they're supposed to say? Did the subcontractors show up? Does the site soup know what they're doing? It's communication. And when we look at communication failures, looking at that latent kind of upstream process to figure out where those happened, you can usually engineer out the problem. If, again, I love what you said earlier, if you're anticipating the next step. So if you're looking at the next step, what are the things that are going to be coming down that pipeline that you might say, ooh, that could be an issue, so let's address it early. So by the time 20 guys are standing on site or the bank is asking questions, that you have answers.
Yeah.
Great question.
So when it comes to, obviously coming into this capital raising sector into the company, kind of how did you start thinking about partnerships, and how did you, rely on your sphere of influence, and kind of how important is the sphere of influence for somebody young like me to develop at a college level?
Yeah. Sphere of influence is, in my mind, everything. The sphere of influence is who you can call on quickly. I always tell people, it's like, I'm old enough to call this a Rolodex yet, but it's your network is your net worth, right? So I'll repeat that one more time. Your network is your net worth. So if you ask me today, and you ask me a lot, hey, do you have that guy's cell phone? Right? And what do? I go to my phone, I pull up the cell phone number, and I give it to you. Mm-hmm. I'm giving you 35 years of experience in a phone number that we can call that person to get information, experience from. So when a young person is starting to look at this, it is honestly probably their biggest opportunity. College, moving into first internship and then into a job, is to build that network. And I call it kind of personal, professional. Maybe there's some institutional giving or some philanthropy in a bucket, right? And all those circles feed into the brand of Kelvin Comstock, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're working constantly to increase your sphere of influence, at some point you're going to have aged through the system, through your career, and then when you're sitting 20 years later, that sphere of influence might be nationwide, could be global, might be just St. Cloud, but people are going to know you and you're going to know people. And then what I always use as an analogy is that one person knows 3 other people that look like them. So how can you leverage those 3 people? I shouldn't say leverage, but it is. How can I leverage them to do more business? Or how can I use them to get to this next person? And you just keep weaving that web, which really is the fabric of your career. Mm-hmm. But utilizing those people, and I know there's a lot of real estate agents, brokers that are watching, other salespeople, they're nodding their head up and down right now going, this is exactly how I built my successful business, or I built my successful brand, because they just kept on leveraging people to build their sphere of influence. But you have to, it's kind of like flowers, right? If you plant a flower seed and you never come back and water it or put fertilizer on it, we call it cultivating, right? Yep. If you don't cultivate that flower, it will never grow to give off seeds. So if you think about it, that means that you have to cultivate those spheres of influence, meaning you don't just have coffee with somebody once and never call them back again. You're constantly having that small sphere of influence, maybe 20, 30 people that you're talking to on a pretty consistent basis that are also talking about, oh, Kelvin's doing this, or I saw Kelvin on social media. and so your brand is starting to get a buzz around it. So then they want to actually be closer to you. So when you go to these other events or being in social circles, you're the person in the room that they want to be around.
And also creating those win-win situations between your sphere of influence.
If you're creating win-win situations or even win-win-win situations we talk about, you're going to absolutely be the person that they want to be around. And I think also the one thing that I want to also mention is being the smartest person in the room or at the table, right? All too often I see people sit around a table and they just sit there. They're not adding value to the conversation. You might not know a lot about construction today, but there's ways that you can be in the conversation so it shows that you're striving to learn more. At some point, you want to be the expert, right? I get the luxury, sorry microphone, I get the luxury today of sitting here as an expert, right? And you're leveraging my expertise to build your sphere of influence. Isaac is, Jason is, everybody is. That's not me bragging, that's just a fact of I'm really old, right? So as you think about that, being the expert in the room, then the people that are in the room even want to meet you more. And so, all of you that are out here listening to this podcast, really strive to get better. It's all about learning. It's really about, like, you're going to the school of construction, development, real estate, capital raises, everything right now on a very fast pace.
Yep.
Not a lot of people will get that opportunity in their lifetime. So, like I've told you, don't mess it up, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm giving you 35 years of experience. I should be charging you $1,000 an hour for this, and you're getting it for free, right? But I know you will do something extremely amazing with this, along with the team at Inventure. So, wrapping this up today, I appreciate you, Kelvin.
Absolutely.
I appreciate everything that you've done, the conversations that we've had.
Yep.
And really wish you the best of luck in your journey here at Inventure. And I just want to say thanks for everybody watching. I've had a lot of people see me on the streets lately, and they're talking about my Wisdom Wednesdays and stuff like that. And I know Austin's got a lot of followers. This has been a really exciting journey so far. Something that's brought me a little bit forward in my career of, just opening up another venue for us to be able to talk about what we do here at Inventure. So if you like what you're seeing, follow us. Click like, do all the things that all the kids talk about you're supposed to do. Like, share, follow, Substack, repost. But again, thank you for watching today. I hope you have a great day. And if you're in the Sartell area, stop in at our job site at the Windham Hotel. Check it out. We should be opening sometime around Labor Day. So have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.